Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings, everyone. Once again, welcome back. This is Education Technology class. In this class for today, we are going to talk about learning theories. We are going to learn about the differences between each of learning theories, the definition, the concepts, the theorists of each of learning theories. And then we are going to move to talk about instructional technology, the models of instruction technology, define each model and how we can actually use it and relate it inside our education technology class or any education settings. So if we actually wish to understand how people learn the art of teaching, we actually must understand, what is the best way to teach people and how actually we should communicate with people. This is what we call learning theories. To adapt in any learning theories, this is actually uh, pretty much like a framework or a guideline about teaching and what way of teaching would you prefer as a teacher. This is all about learning theories. So the art of teaching actually is not something random. It's something informed by the understanding of learning science and how actually our students are going to learn. What are the best ways that we should actually use to make our students learn from us. So, uh, and one more thing that the instructor's view of media role, inside our classroom is actually depends very much on their beliefs about how people learn, which means that the selection of the media that you are going to use, the selection of the technology that are you going to use as a teacher inside your classroom is actually related to the process of how people are going to learn. So when we talk about learning theories, what do we actually mean by the term of learning theories? Learning theories is or it's like it's a guideline or conceptual frameworks that describes the manner in which the information is observed, processed, and retained during learning, which means that you as a teacher, you go to your class and start transferring the knowledge from you to your students. We want to make sure this knowledge is well observed and then processed by the students, and then it's returned when it's needed. Okay, so often the same content can be presented in different ways. Learning theories provide a framework for such learning solutions. I'm pretty sure that if we have any content, this content cannot be actually delivered by different teachers in the same way. Each teacher, each individual has its own way of delivering or conducting the class, or transferring the knowledge that he has to his students, which is actually based on what learning theory this particular teacher is actually related to. Okay, so it's all about the learning theories and how to conduct our teaching process based on a learning theory. And to understand even more about what do we mean by learning theories, we must consider the basic components of any learning theory at all. Each learning theory has three main basic components, which are the inputs. The inputs is the source of information. that, what triggers the process to occur, what are the resources or the experiences that is going to be transferred to our students. This is the input. And then second, we have the means, which are as like a medium of communication. What are the process by which the results are brought about, including any hypothesized structures that these processes are assumed to operate on, which simply means how are we going to conduct, which channel, what are the media that we are going to use to actually transfer the inputs that we have to our students. And then finally, we have the results. The results are actually the changes that occurs on our students or our individuals that are going to, that we are teaching. So what are these changes in performance to be explained by the theory? These are the main three categories that we need to consider in any learning theory. In this class, we are going to talk about three main theories that is used in the field of instructional design as a guidelines for understanding how to develop the instruction. So the main purpose for you to learn about learning theories in this education technology class, because if you decided in the future you are going to be instructional designer, you must actually know what learning theory suits you on your whatever way or whatever content that you are going to deliver. So these three main theories are: one, behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. And we are going to talk about each one of these theories in details. Our first theory is behaviorism. When you hear the term behaviorism, what is the first thing that comes into your mind? Behavior. So this theory, it's all about the changes that happens upon the behavior. So it's based on behavioral changes, focuses on a new behavioral pattern that is actually being repeated time after time until it becomes automatic. So this theory that equates that learning with changes in observable behavior. It's all about the behavior, the changes upon the behavioral changes, among our students or individuals or whatsoever that we are going to, teach. Now, let's talk a bit more in details about some of the theorists of behaviorism learning theory. We will be talking about the work of four different theorists here. Now, just because these four theorists are grouped together does not necessarily means that all they did are the same work. In fact, each theory tells a different story about behavior, and that's why it's important to look at the multiple theories to get actually a different perspectives of each one of them in terms of how, why, what people needs to actually learn. Okay. Let's begin actually by looking at these two particular theorists, which are Pavlov and Watson. These two theorists introduced us what's called as a classical conditioning theory, which means you learn something based on some conditions. There are actually some conditions that is going to help us learn, okay? and which means, people learn automatic responses, and we have, this famous story that Pavlov actually used, which is the story of the dog and the bell. And what he did is actually he brought food to his dog, and each time he brings the food, he rang the bell. So time after time, he repeated this multiple times. Time after time, the dog actually, in his mind, connected the food to the ring bell. So whenever he brings the bell, the dog is ready to eat. He knows it's food time. So this is what we called conditioning. It's based on conditions. Conditioning. Our condition here is ringing the bell. So the food is the dog is ready to have his food. While at the same time, Watson, what he did is that he actually used pretty much the same, but it's different components here, because he used a little boy, a baby, and he actually intended to show this baby rats, okay, white rats. Whenever he shows the baby the rats, he actually makes some scary noises, okay? So what happened is that the little baby actually developed a scary behavior about the rats, because he cannot see the sound, the scary sounds. So whenever he sees the rats, he will imagine this is this is the reasons of these scary voices. So after a while, Watson actually stops of making the noises. He will only show the baby the rats, but the baby actually still crying even if there is no sounds, because he actually connected the shape of the rat, or the image of the rat, of being something scary. So that's actually the work of these two theorists, which are based on the behavior. Okay, and then we have the work of Thorndike. And Thorndike is actually, his major work has to do with connections. That's why it's known as connectionism. And what it simply means that what students learn today is connected somehow, some way, with what they have learned previously or in the future. Okay, this is what do we mean by connectionism. It's connected by the previous experiences, or what it's coming in the future. And then finally we have Skinner. Skinner, on the other hand, went one step further and developed what is called operant condition. And he simply means learning by reinforcement, encouragement, rewards, and punishment. Okay, so if the students do something good, we need to encourage them. If the students behave in a bad way, we must punish them. Okay, so that's what we actually need to understand about each of these four theorists, and I hope it's clear to you. So as a conclusion, for the behaviorist perspective, we must understand that it's observable behavior, and we use reinforcement, we use encouragement, we use rewards and punishment, and it's considered to be as a foundation for computer assisted instruction, and it does not actually reinforce higher level skills, and it depends on the basic knowledge or skills only. And as I mentioned, the behaviorism, we actually must consider the approaches of each one of them. There's actually the classical conditioning, and as I mentioned, the work of Watson's, the operant conditioning, the work of Skinner, and then we have the social learning theory. We actually must differentiate between each one of these definitions. The classical conditioning is about the association between the stimulus and the response. The operant conditioning that Skinner's has actually stepped one way farther and came out with the operant conditioning is when we learn to behave in certain ways due to a positive and negative reinforcement. And then we have the social learning theory, which is the work of Bandura. Behavior is shaped by observing and imitating the behavior of others. So these are the three terms that is related to behaviorism, and we must learn the differences and how to differentiate between each one of them. And then the second learning theories, which is the cognitivism. And to understand the meaning of cognitivism, which simply means how the information that we receive is actually received, organized, and stored, and then later on retrieved by which all happens inside our heads or our students' heads. So this theory is actually uses the mind as an information processor. It actually defines the mind as a computer, a processor. For example, in the classroom, all educational materials should be organized, sequenced, and presented in a manner that is understandable for the students and meaningful for the students to be able actually to understand. And for the cognitivism perspective, it's Jean Piaget work, and it's all about, as I mentioned, how the learners receive, process, and manipulate and retrieve this information when needed. And it's a mental models because it's all inside our students' head or brain. And so it's a cognitive strategist, independent work of the learners. And it compromises between teaching and required standards and the metacognitive approach to teaching in the 21st century learners. So this is all about the cognitivism and how we actually look at cognitivism learning theories. For us to understand the cognitivism or the cognitive theory, there are some key concepts that we need to actually understand. For example, the first one is called schema or schemata. And what is actually schema or schemata means? It's simply as, as a mental framework that organizes information about anything in life inside our brains or our heads. Let's say it's like a file in your brain where new information is compared to whatever exists inside our heads. So whenever you develop a new information, the schema is actually going to compare it with whatever you already have about this thing, and then you need to compare it and then develop a new understanding or cognitive structure. And to give you an example, let's say that we have a child that he just started to walk, for example, and then when he walks now, he wants to pick up anything from the floor, anything. Let's say it's a pen, okay? So when this child picks up the pen for the first time, he has actually developed a schema about, or schemata about, how to pick up things from the floor. So he will save this process, okay, and he will recall it whenever he needs to pick up things from the floor. This is what we call schema or schemata. Okay, and then next we have the three-stage information processing model. And what do we mean actually by that? It's the three-stage information processing model proposes that our brains are like computers. We get input information from the environment, and then when we get this information, we process it inside our heads, and then we output decisions. This is what we call three-stage information processing. First stage is the sensory register or sensory memory, when we receive input the information, and then we transfer it to our short-term memory, and then it's transferred to the long-term memory for to be saved there, okay? And then we actually retrieve this information when we actually need to. And then we have what is called mnemonic effects. And what we mean actually by that is strategies that is used by learners to organize relatively meaningless input into more meaningful images or semantic context. For example, the order of operations in mathematics actually can be remembered by using mnemonic effects. And that's the three concepts that we need actually to consider about the cognitive theory. Okay, as a conclusion for the cognitivism, it's all about the work of the brain, how to process and store information. First, we actually use the sensory register or temporary memory. Okay, the same, it's different terms, but the same meaning. And then whatever information that we have, we transfer it to our short-term memory. And then after the short-term memory, we transfer it to the long-term memory. And whenever this information is transferred to the long-term memory, it's actually it's kept there forever, that we could actually retrieve this information anytime we would like to. So it's all about reference the new, learning with existing knowledge, process, store, and retrieve knowledge, transfer, assimilate new knowledge. And the theorists for this learning theory are Jean Piaget, Robert Gang, and then finally we have Vygotsky. These are the three theorists of cognitivism theory. Then the third type of learning theories, which is Constructivism, which means that learners are active creators of their own knowledge, who learn by observing, manipulating, interpreting the world around them. It's all about the students, and they are independent on how to actually observe things, how to explain things around them, and then retrieve, and then actually save this information inside their heads. So this is because the knowledge is not received from outside. Instead, we construct the knowledge in our head. Okay, so all the knowledge that we have, for example, if I'm walking right now, for the first time, a child sees a tree, and then he will ask, what's this? And then we will answer him, this is a tree. So he will actually construct a knowledge in his head that this shape or this whatever image or the image of the tree as a tree in his head, and so on. And for the constructivist perspective, we need to actually understand it's all about the students. They are independent by their own. So engagement of students in a meaningful experiences, active problem solving. It's all about, discovery and problem solving by their own. Interpret information for their own understanding. Authentic tasks, use of knowledge to facilitate thinking real in life. Critical thinking, developing critical thinking of the students in the 21st century. Learners will need to solve problems by their own. They seek information or skills to actually find an effective solutions. So it's all about constructing the knowledge inside our students' head. So it's actually independent work of our students. But we actually need to consider that constructivism is divided into two types, which are cognitive constructivism, which is all about individual work. The students by himself or herself. While on the other hand, there's actually the social constructivism, which is all about the interactions with others. So these actually the main differences about these two type of cognitive constructivism and social. Cognitive is all about the experience and process through which learning occurs, independent work. Social, on the other hand, it's the learning through interaction with others. Okay, as you can see here, this is interaction with others, while this one, independent work. So the cognitive constructivism, independent work. Social constructivism, it's an interaction with others. So what we actually need to consider about constructivism, that it's actually an independent work of the students. The students must be involved in the process of teaching and learning. So emphasize learning rather than teaching. And what are the differences here? Learning actually depends on the students himself. Learning could be happening without a teacher, but teaching is actually, it all depends on the teaching. So we could actually encourage the students to learn by themselves. This is what we call constructivism. And then emphasize active learning. Active learning means it's a two-way communications. It's not only one way. If you remember, in the previous class, we have discussed about the active learning, how we actually could make an active learning class. We could actually ask students about their opinions, what do they think about something, and then hear out from the students, not only speak. Use discovery or guided discovery. Let the students discover about their own solutions. It's all about involving the students in the classroom. Support learners' reflections. Encourage learners' construction of information and projects. Let them do a problem-based projects. Put them in a real-life problem and then ask them to find their own way, their own solutions to this kind of problems. So for the social psychology perspective, it's all about cooperative learning. We need to involve our students inside our classroom. It's independent study, whether it's small, whole group, students control. We could use reward structure, punishment structure and so on. So it's all about encouraging the students to be involved, to be active, to actually be learners instead of just waiting for the teachers to be teaching them. They should be actually independent and search for their own way to actually learn about things in life. But for us as a teacher, we need to be reminded, as always, it's not recommended to use one learning theory and leave the others, because if you want to get the best results, you actually need to merge various principles to actually consider all the aspects of our students. Okay. Okay, very good. So far, very good. I hope the learning theories are clear to you and you could actually understand the meaning of each one of them and how to differentiate between each of them. Now, let's move on to instructional design. What do we mean by instructional design? What actually, for you as a future instructional designer, what should you do? What is your job? This is what we are going to explain in this slide. Okay, instructional design, guys. If you want a simple definition of instructional design, which is how to actually make our teaching material more like a systematic way, which we could actually employ to develop education and training programs. For you as an instructional designer, if you would like to become an instructional designer, is the art or the science of creating detailed specifications for the development, implementation, evaluation, and the maintenance of any situations that facilitates learning, teaching and learning. For example, what is the job of instructional designer is actually to design the syllabus, the content, how to deliver this content in a technological way, and it could be actually involve the development process, the implementation, how we are going to implement this course that we have, how are going to evaluate. For example, if you want to develop a website, educational website, this process is called instructional design. But for the website to be considered as instructional design, you need to consider how to develop it, how to implement this website to your students, and how to get the evaluation from your students, and how to maintain this if you need to. And for the process of instructional design to be actually successful, you need to follow a model of instructional design. And that's what we are going to talk about later on in this slide. So why do we actually have to design the instruction instead of, just randomly select any media and use it as an educational medium, which is not the correct way? We actually need to design the instruction to increase and enhance the possibility of learning, and to make the acquisition of knowledge and skill more efficient, effective, and appealing. And then finally, to encourage the engagement of learners so that they learn faster and gain deeper levels of understanding, which are based on previous literature. The design instruction has been built based on experience and based on prior studies and so on. So instructional design actually is based on 3 psychological principles of learning, which are behavioral, cognitive, and constructivist, which we have learned earlier. The behavioral psychology, it actually advocates the repetition and reinforcement in learning material to create a behavior change in the learner. And then we have the cognitive psychology, which focuses on engaging, how to engage our learners in our teaching process in education, in instructional design, and how to make them actually create a learning process. And then finally, the constructivism, which emphasizes the learner's own experience and personal interpretation. So that's why we actually need to, you as an instructional designer, you need to consider each one of them. You need to consider to mix these three to come out with a very good outcome as an instructional designer. And for us to understand instructional design even more, we need to discuss about instructional design models. What do we mean by instructional design models? It's actually a framework or a systematic way that we need to follow. For example, there are some models that tells us that the design part comes first, and then followed by implementation, and then followed by evaluation, and so on. So it tells us how could we actually conduct our instructions. Okay, and let's see some examples to understand the meaning of instructional design. What is instructional design model? It's actually an instructional design model is a method. For example, a general design rule on how to teach or bring to learn, usually restricted to a given class or of subjects and context. Instructional design models usually have a stronger focus on learning theory than instructional design methods. There actually have been multiple instructional design models developed and implemented over the years. For example, we have Assure, we have Gan's 9 events of instructions, we have AddiE Model, ARCS, KEMP, and we will get to learn about each one of these models and how we actually could differentiate between each of these models and how we get the chance to select which model is considered more fit to our instructional. First one is Assure's model, which consists of these 6 stages. First, analysis, which is the A. Okay, analysis, learners. We need to analyze our students' behavior or whatever it is before we conduct this model. So first, we analyze our learners, and then state the objectives that we are going to achieve along the way, and then select what method or media or materials that is more fit or more appropriate to our class, and then utilize the media and materials, require learners' participation, evaluate, and revise. These are the 6 steps of Assure model, and it's called Assure because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stages, and each letter of this stages has been written in the name of this model, ASSURE. Okay, ASSURE. And for the Assure models, as I mentioned, we have these 6 stages that we need to consider. First, analyze learners. The audience can be analyzed in terms of their general characteristics, and then we have to state our objectives that we are going to achieve during this class. State the objectives for the lessons or presentation. For example, if you want to teach kindergarten students ABC, you need to consider the lesson should be more attractive, more catchy, non-boring materials, and so on. And then we select strategies, technology, what media that we need to have in this particular class, and then utilize the media, decide how the materials will be used by the students. And then require learner participation. Learners need to participate what they have learned, describe how the learners will actively use the materials you have selected, and then finally evaluate. After the instruction, we evaluate the entire instruction process. Did it work, or do we actually need to repeat or fix something along the way? So these are the 6 main steps in a sure model. Second, we have again 9 events of instructions, which are: 1. Gain attention. 2. Inform learners of objectives. 3. Stimulate recall of prior knowledge or learning. Present the content. Provide learning guidance. Elect performance, which is practice by the students. Provide feedback, and then assess performance, and then finally enhance retention and transfer to the job. These are the 9 elements or 9 events of instruction. Third model is AddiE model, which consists of analysis, design, develop, implementation, evaluation. AddiE model. The first phase, which is analysis, we need to analyze and gather information about what we have to set of the project to define our approach. Instructional objectives, we need to define the objectives. We need to select, analyze the learner's need. What do they actually need to learn before we consider using the appropriate media, for example, or teaching approach. Second, we have design. Design is a systematic method for putting various teaching tools in a place to create an overall approach. And the design means we actually need to learn about the objectives and how to make our course meet this objective, achieve these objectives in the perfect way as soon as we can. And in the design process, we need actually to explain about the content, the exercise, the lesson plan, the media selection, or how you will get information to the students. So we analyzed our students' needs, and then we designed, and then we developed the third step, which is development, which that builds on the design step. Whatever we have designed on our scenarios, we actually going to implement, develop these steps. Developers will build out the prototype, creating actual materials as we planned in the design phase. And in this phase, we create the actual content that learners will receive throughout the course of instruction, creating storyboards, building out exercises, creating e-learning materials. For example, if I want to back again to our example, which is teaching using a website. Okay, if you want to follow instructional design model, which is AddiE. When you want to design a website, you need first to analyze your learners' need. If they are in the first grade, one of the conditions that you need to consider is you need a colorful website. This comes from the analysis part. And then for the design, how you are going to actually divide the website to make it easy for the students to use. And then for the development phase, which is this phase, the current one, you are going actually to start programming the website, develop the website. And then the next phase, which is actually implementation. We are done with the development, so we give the link of the website to our students to actually start using it. So in this phase, which learners actually receive the instructions and materials prepared for them throughout the previous 3 steps of AddiE model. The most important step, because it's where the learning actually occurs. These are the previous 3 phases is, it's all about preparation. Now we implement. This is the actual experience when our students experience the implementation of the website. Finally, the final phase, which is evaluation, where we could actually evaluate our works. Is it worth the work? Is it, achieved our objectives? And it could actually happen in 2 ways, which are the formative evaluation and summative of AddiE evaluation. Formative evaluation happens in every step. It's like a continuous evaluation. This is where you ask questions related to the content you are developing, with the goal of ensuring that it's meeting our objectives in each step. The summative AddiE evaluation is more formal, and it can really help you see where your process needs more work. So this is all about AddiE model, and it's the most actually famous instructional design models, and it has been used in many research and studies before. So this figure actually helps you out to understand more about AddiE model, where the analysis is number 1, and then goes down to design, goes down to development, goes down to implementation, and then these kind of 2 types of evaluation, which is the summative evaluation, which is the final process, or we could use the formative evaluation. And the formative evaluation here is actually related to each step. As we mentioned, this is actually could be in each of the steps, while on the other hand, this summative evaluation, it's the final step of these 4 steps, like here. Okay, the formative evaluation, it's a continuous evaluation for each phase of the model, while the summative evaluation is the final step. So as a conclusion, in order to teach, we need to know how people learn. We need to understand the learning theories. How are we going to conduct our learning, teaching and learning classroom or sessions? We need to actually, be aware of how people learn, whether it's a cognitive, constructivism, and so on. So, learning these kind of theories will make us or will give us the ability actually to create effective instructions. The instructions should be planned and designed, which is based on one of the models that we have studied. And there are models that can be used as a guide to design instruction. You, as an instructional designer, you need to follow one of the models that we have discussed to come out with the best results of your classroom or your session. All right, then finally we have come to the end of this class. I hope everything is clear to you guys. As usual, this is the e-learning activity. It's an online discussion task, and we actually need to find out about ARCS model, and it depends. Sometimes I might ask different questions, not ARCS only, but maybe AddiE as well. So it depends on the question you get in e-learning. And that's it for today. I hope everything is clear to you, and until we meet online, stay safe. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.